Right by Them, a Magnus Archives fanfiction written by Esperosis and read by Ibis Podfic. Chapter 20, Confrontation. Summary. John is revisited by a familiar face after receiving a new tape from Basira. So, no clues about how she ended up in the tunnels? Basira asked. No, none, John replied. The first tape was about some creature under Alexandria, and the last one was about Mary Key. Mary Key? Mother of Gerard Key? Yes. She claimed to have a book where, upon binding the victim's skin to a new page, it would trap their soul. She apparently used it on quite a few people, was a bit obsessed with it, John explained. Huh, Basira frowned. Do you know how she died? She was, allegedly, flayed by her son and had her skin written on in Sanskrit. Allegedly? Well, John gave a tight smile. If you heard the way she was talking, I think you'd also wonder if the wounds weren't self-inflicted. Basira hummed again. Interesting, but not really relevant. Let me know if there's anything on this one. Basira held out another tape. Right as John accepted the tape, there was a knock at John's office door, startling both of them. John quickly took the tape and placed it in his lap, out of view, as the door began to open. Hey, John, Melanie began as she opened the door, only to stop upon seeing Basira. Am I interrupting something? No, Basira stood. I was just leaving. Thank you for your time, Mr. Sims. It's perfectly all right, Officer Sen. Let me know if you need anything else, John replied. Basira slipped past Melanie on her way out, and Melanie glanced between the pair, visibly shocked, before taking a few tentative steps into John's office, gently shutting the door behind her. What was that about? Did something happen? She asked. Quite a few things, actually. But was there something you needed, Miss King? Melanie scoffed. Miss King. Come on now, John. We're both Georgie's friends. No need to be such a pompous arse. John sighed. Was there something you wanted, Melanie? I need to ask a bit of a favor. Dread filled John's stomach, as he was pretty sure he already knew exactly what this favor was. And what is that? Well, I'm looking into researching. Did you listen to my statement? I did. Right, well, after that, I decided I want to look into war ghosts, grey ladies, that sort of thing. So I've been looking into them, and everywhere I go says the biggest source for paranormal research on war ghosts is... Here, John sighed. The library of the Magnus Institute. Exactly, but it's only open to students and researchers. But if I could have a department head vouch for me... John pinched the bridge of his nose, mentally preparing for the incoming shitstorm that was about to be unleashed. Melanie, Come on, John, Melanie pressed. I won't mess with any of your precious academics. I just need access to a few books. I can't, Melanie, John told her. Please just don't. Why not? She demanded. Look, Melanie, the things here in this institute are very real and very dangerous. Please, just stop. Melanie laughed angrily. You want me to just stop? Yes. Fuck you, she spat. I'm not some amateur that needs to be coddled. I get that you don't respect ghost hunters, but I hope that you'd at least respect me enough to trust me to know what the hell I'm doing. You don't understand. I understand you're a useless, arrogant asshole, and I don't know what Georgie sees in you. The office was plunged into silence, as John really didn't have an argument against Melanie's words as they were. Objectively true. He didn't know what Georgie saw in him either. Yet, he couldn't give Melanie what she wanted. He knew where that road went, and, even if she hated him for it, he'd save her from that fate. I can't, he finally broke his silence, his voice barely above a whisper. Whatever, Melanie scowled before muttering prick under her breath. She threw the door open and stormed out, slamming it behind her, causing John to flinch. John rested his elbows on his desk and buried his head in his hands, the tape laid forgotten on his lap. That could have gone better, but it also could have gone a lot worse. He'd like to be friends with Melanie, proper friends, but it seemed that just wasn't in the cards for him. He didn't even blame her for not liking him, but he couldn't exactly explain himself. All he could do was hope Georgie might smooth things over for them once she and Melanie started dating. There were some gentle knocks at John's door, and John lowered his hands as his assistant peeked into the room. Hey, John, how are you doing? Martin asked. His 3 assistants were blocking the only exit. It would be trivially easy to rush him and murder him in various horrible ways using the objects in this room. John took a shaky breath. I'm fine. I don't need you 3 to coddle me. Yeah, but some of that stuff was pretty rude, Martin continued. I imagine that was the point. Still, really, it's fine, he continued. It's not as if I was overly polite to her the first time we met anyways. Anyway, Basira gave me a new tape. Tim clapped and rubbed his hands together as he finished dragging his rolling chair over. What are you thinking on this one? I personally am hoping for the Loch Ness Monster. Really? I think a part 2 to the American Wolfman would be interesting, Sasha joked. She sat herself down in one of the 2 armchairs. I was hoping for something more, relevant to what's going on in the last 2. Martin sat in the other armchair. Tim playfully patted Martin's arm as he settled in between him and Sasha. We all are. Oh, right, yeah. What about you, John? Sasha asked. John furrowed his brow as he loaded up the tape. There were many tapes that John could hope this one would be, and a few he hoped it wouldn't. But as he glanced up at Tim and Sasha's mirthful expressions, he found a smirk teasing at his own lips. I hope it's about a really huge pig. Sasha snorted as Tim smirked. Are we talking about a giant monster pig with 6 heads and hoof steps that shake the earth? No, John continued proud. Just a very, very large pig. So, Tim announced, we've got Loch Ness Monster, American Wolfman 2. That sounds like a bad horror movie, Sasha interrupted. And just a really big pig, Tim continued. And something relevant, I guess, he said over dramatically. Well, John, Sasha looked at him. Let's see who our lucky winner is. John sighed and pressed play on the tape. Case 9790302. Yuri Utkin. Incident occurred in the village of Algosovo, Central Russia, November 1952. Statement given 2nd of March 1979. Committed to tape 15th of April 1997. Gertrude Robinson recording. As a child, I always loved the circus. Gertrude's voice played from the tape. John's blood ran cold, and his skin began to buzz as all the mirth was sucked out of the room in an instant. His eyes immediately snapped to Tim, quickly finding Sasha had done the same. Tim's expression was already clouded over, his eyes darkening as the statement began. John and Sasha caught each other's eyes, both unsure what to do as the tail of the circus washed over the 4 of them. Things got tenser and tenser as Gertrude continued, Tim's face barely concealing his anger, John and Sasha not even attempting to disguise their concern, and a confused and fretful Martin completely in the dark, and a sudden shift in mood. Eventually, the statement ended, and Gertrude made her final comments. Tim gave a bitter, angry laugh as the tape shut off. Yeah, lucky. We're really lucky those freaks let them off so easily. Didn't even take anyone's skin or anything. Is it Tim? Martin asked, his face twisted in confusion and concern. Tim, Sasha reached out, placing a hand on Tim's shoulder. Right, Tim smiled even as his eyes were alight with bitter hatred. You and John must be confused. See, Sasha already knows, and I let John know that I didn't like clowns, but I don't think I ever mentioned anything to you, Martin. That's all right, Martin stammered. No, I insist. Tim's teeth were bared as he angrily grinned. Who knows, Martin? Maybe the clown monsters will show back up and try to skin John. Just our luck at this point. John flinched. So let's talk about it, Tim continued. Let's talk about why I joined the Institute. Hell, let's even make a statement out of it. No, John shouted before he could stop himself, and all eyes snapped to John. He swallowed hard as he tried to recover. I just, there's no need to, make it a statement. His skin buzzed uncomfortably. You can just tell us if you want to. We can keep it between us. Tim stared at him for a few moments before scoffing. Sure, probably for the best. Then he began. John racked his memory, desperate to know if it was a statement. He nearly sobbed in relief as he realized it wasn't, identifying the differences between then and now. John felt himself tremble in relief and how sick he felt with Elias's gaze. Before his little stare down with Elias, he was only ever vaguely aware if Elias was spying on him, and even then it usually slipped under his notice. But now he could feel Elias's eyes like a brand on his skin, eating at his flesh and insides. It was useful, knowing exactly what Elias was watching, but extremely violating in a way that made John feel sick with vulnerability and terror, and it never failed to make his skin buzz. Compounding all of this was that near-maddening feeling of missing something. It was worse now than it's ever been, screaming at him that whatever it was right there, right in front of him. If only he could see it, if only he could know. John generally thought he was about to be sick in a bed a few times during Tim's story from the toxic mix of sensations. And yet, even as he barely heard a thing Tim said, he somehow absorbed every word. Right at the end, perhaps realizing the effect he was having on John, and more likely having heard all he needed, Elias's gaze dissipated. John could finally breathe. So yeah, Tim concluded, I didn't join the Institute to see if I could find any info about the monster circus that killed Danny. So far, no dice. I'm so sorry. Don't, Tim told Martin as he tried to comfort him. It's my fault he's gone. If I had just... It's not your fault, John told him as he finally regained his breath. John, Tim started. There was nothing you could have done, John continued. Tim sneered, his expression darkening. Nothing? I saw them. They had him on the stage and I did nothing. He was already dead, Tim, John argued back. There was nothing you could have done. Tim laughed angrily and narrowed his eyes at John. John could feel himself pale and shrink back, away from the familiar fury as his friends watched on in silent horror. And before that, back when he was still alive, I abandoned him. If I had just stayed awake, he'd still be dead, John forced out. What? Tim shot up from his seat. Sasha and Martin quickly followed. Tim just calmed down. Sasha grabbed his arm, but Tim stayed tense, staring down John as Martin placed his hand on John's shoulder. So John, maybe we should leave. No, Tim demanded. I want to hear what he has to say. Why, John? Why would he still have died? The room fell into silence as John took a deep breath and tried to figure out how to say what he wanted to say. If there's one major takeaway I've learned from these statements and follow-ups, Tim, it's that these things don't just let people go. Once you're marked by them, they'll come back for you like an unfinished meal. Maybe not that day, maybe not that week, but eventually. If you had stayed up with him, maybe you wouldn't have been taken that night, but sooner rather than later, they would have come back for him. And what about you? Tim glared down at him. John blinked in surprise. I'm sorry? You, Tim spat. You're talking big about how once you get marked, you're fucked. But that spider never came back for you, did it? No, you're perfectly alright. No spider monsters to be seen. Sasha gasped, and John wasn't sure what sort of face he made before he wrestled back control of his expression, but whatever it was must have been bad. Tim's own face immediately morphed from rage to self-conscious horror, quickly realizing he crossed the line. Tim, let's go, Sasha told him as he began to drag him away. Well, wait. Now, Sasha cut him off, dragging Tim out of John's office and shutting the door behind them. Martin was on John in an instant, pulling Tim's chair around his desk to sit in front of John. Hey, John, talk to me. I'm not upset, John told him, even as grief, anger, and soul-deep exhaustion made his head buzz. Yes, you are. Martin grabbed his hands and the buzzing faded. I'm not upset with Tim, he amended. Martin opened his mouth, shut it, then opened it again. It's all right if you are. John gave Martin a weak smile and squeezed his hands. I know, but I'm not. Can I ask why? John trailed off and leaned back slightly, dragging his eyes away from Martin to stare at nothing in particular. I know he didn't mean it. Well, he did. But he just said it to hurt me because he was mad. This is how he gets. I'd be lying if I said I'd never done the same. He laughed bitterly. But I know he doesn't actually wish Mr. Spider had come back and killed me or something. I know he doesn't begrudge that I didn't die when I was 8. Though, maybe he should. Lots of others did. He was mad and he wanted to lash out and hurt me. I'm not mad at him for that. John finally looked back at Martin, who was looking at him with concern. John, you know you can be mad when someone hurts you, right? Especially when they do it on purpose. I know that. Do you? Martin asked. Because Melanie was really rude to you earlier. You just brushed it off. Now you're admitting that you know Tim hurt you on purpose, and yet you're not upset with him, Martin pointed out as he looked at John intently. John took a long breath in through his nose and let it pour out through his mouth. How could he possibly explain it? How could he possibly explain how long he'd spent at odds with Tim and Melanie? How long he'd fought with them and been angry with them and been subject to their wrath in return? How could he put the bone-deep ache into words Martin would understand? How bitterly John had parted with them, and how he couldn't bring himself to be upset with either of them for a second more. He was tired. He was so very tired. There was still so much to do. I don't want to be upset with them, John finally spoke. Martin waited patiently for an explanation John couldn't give him. Then, when it was clear John could not continue, he gave John a pained smile. All right, just as long as you know you're perfectly justified in being upset. Thank you. And you know you can talk to me about anything, yeah? John thought of all the things he knew he could, without a doubt, not mention to Martin. He nodded. Of course. Martin smiled sadly, and John knew he'd seen through the shabby lie, but was grateful enough not to call him out immediately. Martin squeezed his hands and gave him a quick, somewhat tentative kiss. Let's get something to eat, all right? John hummed, already feeling a bit better. They left his office and made their way up the stairs and out of the archive. As they passed the break room, John saw the door was shut, and he could hear Sasha and Tim's, but mostly Sasha's, voices inside. They both sounded upset. Before John could even think about the possibility of walking in, Martin was tugging him along. Best give them some space now. I'm sure Tim will apologize soon. Right, of course, John nodded, frowning, and the two walked up the stairs and out of the archives. John's skin began to crawl as the hair on the back of his neck stood on end in the telltale way that told him Elias's gaze was back on him. John grit his teeth and breathed through it, trying his best to ignore the sensation. He wasn't exactly sure what Elias would find so interesting about him going out to lunch with his boyfriend, but the most likely reason was that Elias was interested in the mere fact that John was leaving the archives at all. He bit back an annoyed sigh and refocused on the far lovelier man ahead of him. Then he caught something out of the corner of his eye. John stopped in his tracks right as they were about to leave the institute, his head snapping to the side. John? Martin asked as they stopped. John didn't reply, his eyes desperately searching for a glimpse of what he thought he saw, desperate to prove the rising dread wrong. Quickly, he strode forward and through the open doors of the Institute's library, his eyes searching from side to side before finding what he feared he would. Melanie! Melanie turned, 3 books held in her arms. As soon as she realized it was John, she smirked. Oh, hey, Mr. Sims, she grinned. What are you? Funny story. I actually ran into your boss on the way out. We had a lovely chat, and I explained my problem, and how you refused to let me use the library. After hearing that, he gave me permission to use the library himself. Melanie's grin turned exceedingly smug. Maybe you should take a lesson or two from Elias. He's much less of an asshole than you. It was at that moment that John was finally certain that, without a shred of doubt, the dread powers were gone from his original reality. Because, if they weren't, his original Melanie would have found some way to travel here and punch this Melanie in the mouth for that comment. John breathed in, counted to 5, and then breathed out. Melanie? And don't even try getting me kicked out unless you want problems with your boss. John grit his teeth as he felt Elias's gaze on him. He could feel his hands begin to tremble at his sides, having long already curled into fists. Just be careful, he finally settled on. Whatever, Melanie dismissed him. John sighed and turned to leave. You know, you're really rude, Martin scowled at Melanie. Excuse me? She scowled right back at Martin, and John felt his heart leap into his throat. You, Martin repeated, are very rude. I'm rude, Martin. John tried to butt in but was ignored. Yes, and not your boss, she demanded. You're way worse than he is. Martin crossed his arms. Martin, please. John tried to pull him away, but Melanie was already seeing red. Oh, I'm sorry, she snarled, but I am sick. One of the librarians loudly hushed the group. Melanie closed her eyes, took a deep, angry breath, and continued in a lower voice. I am sick and tired of pompous, self-righteous, oh, I'm so very smart, academic assholes like him. Melanie jabbed a finger at John, buzzing me around and treating me like a nuisance. So yeah, maybe I am ruder than he is, but that's only because he doesn't have to stoop to my level, she hissed. Martin's face was red now, a deep, red, indignant flush, so unlike the lovely pink. He turned for John. Martin, please. John stepped between them. I really appreciate you standing up for me, but please let's go. Melanie scoffed. Standing up for you, as if you need protecting. Martin opened his mouth. Martin. Martin's eyes snapped to John, and John just shook his head. Martin sighed and took a step back, and Melanie scowled. Fine, whatever, she muttered. Make me look like the bad guy. John leads Martin away and out of the institute, both of their hands trembling slightly in each other's grip. I really don't like her, Martin scowled as they descended the entrance steps. I'm sure she'll grow on us, John smiled. I really don't think so.